The G7 meeting D62. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents 1. The G7 meeting. 2. Comprehension. 3. Grammar page. 1. The G7 meeting. Kulwant Sandhu. In a city bright where flags fly high, 7 leaders meet beneath the sky. From Canada cold to Japan's warm sun, they talk as friends, their work begun. The G7 gathers, voices clear, to share their plans for a world so dear. They speak of peace, of clean, green lands, of helping hearts and joining hands. France brings ideas, bold and new. Germany's thoughts are strong and true. Italy sings of art and care, while Britain dreams of skies so fair. The US calls for hope and trust. Japan says, build a world that's just. Canada smiles with forests wide. Let's work as one, they all decide. No fight, no fear, just words that grow like rivers deep, their kindness flows. The G7 stands, together strong, to make the world where all belong. So let us learn from what they do and build a future, bright and true. With every step we'll find our way, for peace and love, like G7's day. A day at the G7 summit. My name is Aisha, and I'm 19 years old. I live in Cornwall, a beautiful place in the UK with blue seas and green hills. Last summer, something exciting happened. The G7 summit came to my town. The G7 is a group of 7 countries: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. Their leaders meet to talk about big problems, like climate change, peace, and health. This year they invited guest countries, India, South Korea, and Australia, to join the talks. I was a volunteer at the summit, and it was the best day of my life. The morning started early. I woke up at 6 a.m. and put on my volunteer uniform, a white shirt and a blue badge with G7 Volunteer written on it. I felt nervous but proud. My job was to help at the Welcome Center, where guests arrived. I had to check their names and give them maps of the summit. Before the summit began, our team leader, Mr. Patel, told us about the G7's history. The G7 started in 1975, he said. Back then it was called the G6 because only 6 countries, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, met. They wanted to solve money problems after a big oil crisis. In 1976, Canada joined, and it became the G7. Over the years, they talked about trade, peace, and the environment. Sometimes they invite other countries, like India or South Korea, to share ideas. I listened carefully. I didn't know the G7 was so old, or that it helped the world for so long. At 8 a.m., the first guests arrived. They were journalists from South Korea, one of the guest countries. They carried big cameras and spoke politely. Thank you, they said in English. I helped them find the press room. Next, a group from India, another guest, arrived. They wore colorful clothes and smiled warmly. Namaste, one said, and I said it back, feeling excited to meet people from far away. By 10 a.m., the leaders started to arrive. First was the Prime Minister of Canada. He was tall and kind. Good morning, Aisha, he said, reading my badge. I couldn't believe he said my name. Then came the President of France, who waved at everyone. The German Chancellor was quiet but smiled softly. I saw the leaders from Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, too. They looked serious but friendly. The guest leaders from India, South Korea, and Australia arrived next. The Indian Prime Minister shook hands with everyone. The Australian leader talked about saving oceans, and the South Korean leader carried a notebook, looking ready to work. At noon, I had a break. I ate a sandwich with my friend Sam, another volunteer. This is amazing, Sam said. The G7 has been solving problems for 50 years, and now we're here. I agreed. I thought about how the G7 started because of an oil crisis, and now helps with climate change and schools. It made me feel proud to be part of it. In the afternoon, my job changed. I guided a group of students from a local school to a special event. They were 12 years old and very excited. We went to a tent where a scientist talked about climate change. She showed pictures of melting ice and said, "The G7 leaders and guests like India and Australia want to save our planet." The children asked questions like, "Can we plant more trees?" The scientist smiled and said, "Yes, you can help." I remembered Mr. Patel's words about the G7's history and thought, they've been helping the planet since the 1970s. After the talk, I took the students to an art display. Each G7 country, plus the guests, made a poster about their culture. Japan's poster had cherry blossoms. Italy's showed pizza and old buildings. Canada's had a big forest. The UK's poster had a picture of Cornwall's beach, which I loved. India's poster showed a tiger and a festival with bright lights. South Korea's had traditional dancers, and Australia's showed kangaroos and the ocean. The students drew their own posters and wrote messages like, "We want clean air," and "Peace for all." One girl said, "I want to visit India one day." I smiled because the G7 brought the world together. At 5 p.m. my work was done. I stood outside and watched the leaders leave. They looked tired but hopeful. I heard the US President say, "We agreed to help poor countries." The Indian leader said, "Let's share technology for health." The Australian leader added, "We'll protect the oceans together." I felt proud because I helped make the summit run smoothly, just like volunteers at G7 meetings years ago. That evening, I went home and told my family everything. My little brother asked, "Did you meet a president?" I laughed and said, "I saw them all, even the guests from India and South Korea." My mum said, "Aisha, you helped the world today." I smiled because maybe she was right. The next day, I read the news. The G7 leaders, with India, South Korea and Australia, made plans to stop climate change, build schools in Africa and share vaccines. I thought about the G7's history, from solving money problems in 1975 to helping the world today. I felt excited because I was part of it. I learned that even small jobs, like being a volunteer, are important. The G7, with its guest countries, is about working together, and I saw that with my own eyes. Now, I want to study more about the world. Maybe one day I'll work at another summit, or even be a leader. For now, I'm happy to be Aisha, the girl who helped at the G7 in Cornwall. 2 comprehension questions and answers. Question 1. Where does Aisha live? Question 2. What is the G7? Question 3. Which guest countries were invited to the G7 summit in the story? Question 4. What was Aisha's job as a volunteer at the summit? Question 5. When did the G7 start, and why? Question 6. What did the scientist talk about at the event Aisha attended? Question 7. What was on India's poster at the art display? Question 8. What instrument did the Australian group play at the cultural performance? Question 9. What did Aisha hear the leaders say as they left the summit? Question 10. What does Aisha want to do in the future after the summit? Answers. Answer 1. Aisha lives in Cornwall, a place in the UK with blue seas and green hills. Answer 2. The G7 is a group of 7 countries, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, whose leaders meet to talk about global problems. Answer 3. India, South Korea, and Australia were invited as guest countries. Answer 4. Aisha helped at the Welcome Center, checked guests' names, gave out maps, guided students, and assisted at a cultural performance. Answer 5. The G7 started in 1975 as the G6 to solve money problems after an oil crisis, and Canada joined in 1976. Answer 6. The scientist talked about climate change and showed pictures of melting ice. Answer 7. India's poster showed a tiger and a festival with bright lights. Answer 8. The Australian group played a didgeridoo, a big wooden instrument. Answer 9. Asia herd leaders say they agreed to help poor countries, share technology for health, and protect the oceans. Answer 10. Asia wants to study more about the world, and maybe work at another summit, or become a leader. 3 grammar page.